There comes a moment in life when you stop asking, why do I keep attracting the wrong people? And begin asking a much braver question, what in me keeps accepting them? That question is not self-blame, it is self-awakening. Healthy love does not arrive because you chase it hard enough or perform perfectly. It arrives when your nervous system learns safety, when your boundaries stop apologizing for existing, and when your inner child no longer has to beg for crumbs and call it affection. You do not find a green flag, you become one. And when you do, the dynamics of your relationships begin to rewrite themselves, not magically but authentically, because you are no longer negotiating your worth just to avoid being alone. Tonight, I want to talk to the part of you that is tired of almost love, tired of rescuing, tired of proving. The part that longs for a relationship where your softness isn't exploited and your strength isn't feared, where love feels like home, not a battlefield. Healthy relationships are not built by two perfect people, they are built by two aware people. Most of us didn't grow up learning what healthy love feels like. We learned how to perform, how to please, how to stay quiet to be kept, or loud to be noticed. We learned that love had conditions hidden inside it, and our nervous system memorized those conditions as normal. So adulthood arrives, and we do something innocent yet painful we call familiarity, chemistry. If chaos was home, peace feels boring. If inconsistency was love, stability feels suspicious. Cultivating your inner green flag means gently question this programming. It means asking, does my body relax around this person? Do I shrink here or do I expand? Do I lose myself to be loved or am I allowed to exist fully? A healthy relationship does not save you from yourself. It invites you back to yourself, and this begins inside you, not with perfection, but with honesty. You become a green flag when you stop performing and begin listening inwardly. When you notice your triggers, not as proof that you are too much, but as proof that there is something inside you still asking for care. And when you can say no without drowning in guilt. And when you stop chasing people who are allergic to emotional intimacy. And when you refuse to confuse intensity with intimacy. Being a green flag is not about being endlessly patient, endlessly kind, endlessly giving. That is martyrdom, not maturity. A green flag is balanced, gentle yet boundaried, loving yet self-respecting, compassionate yet self-protective. You attract what you are willing to tolerate, and you keep what you are willing to communicate. Healthy relationships are not drama-free, they are repair-capable. There will be misunderstandings, but not manipulation. There will be conflict, but not emotional violence. There will be tears, but not fear. The real question is not, do they love me? The real question is, do I feel myself disappearing to keep this love alive? Cultivating your inner green flag means you are no longer willing to abandon yourself in exchange for closeness. You are no longer auditioning for affection. You choose partners who meet you, not just want you. When you grow in this way, something shifts quietly, but powerfully. What once felt irresistible now feels unsafe. What once felt like love now feels like self-betrayal. And what once felt too healthy now finally feels like home. This is not the journey of fixing yourself. It is the journey of returning to yourself. Now let's talk about some habits of healthy relationships. Number one is open and honest communication without punishment. Open and honest communication is only possible where the nervous system is not bracing for attack. Many people do not fear speaking the truth because they lack words. They fear it because in their history, honesty was followed by withdrawal, humiliation, silence, or rage. So they learn to edit themselves. They learn to speak in carefully measured doses, to hide what hurt, to translate their pain into jokes or silence. Communication without punishment means unlearning that reflex. It means creating a space where truth is not used as a weapon, where vulnerability is not met with ridicule, where mistakes do not automatically threaten connection. In healthy connection, honesty is not a performance. It is a risk that both people are willing to hold gently. You do not have to rehearse every sentence in your head before you say it. You are not walking on invisible glass. You can say, "This hurt me," without the fear that love will be withdrawn as a price. And you can hear the other person say, "This hurt me," without feeling annihilated or ashamed. This kind of communication requires courage because it asks you to show yourself rather than manage the other person's perception of you. It asks you to tolerate discomfort instead of escaping into defensiveness or blame. It asks you to stay present with your own feelings long enough to express them clearly rather than exploding or shutting down. When communication is open and free of punishment, conflicts do not disappear, they transform. They become opportunities to understand the wound beneath the reaction. You begin to hear not just the words, but the childhoods speaking through them. You realize that your partner is not your enemy, and you are not theirs. You are two nervous systems learning not to fight for survival inside a conversation. And in that space, honesty stops feeling dangerous and starts feeling like intimacy. Number 2 is respect for each other's boundaries without guilt tripping. Respecting each other's boundaries means recognizing that love does not grant ownership. It is the understanding that two people can be deeply connected without dissolving into one another. A boundary is not a rejection. It is simply the shape of a person's truth, where they end and where you begin. Many of us learned that saying no threatens love, that expressing limits leads to anger, distance, or punishment. So we overextend, over-explain, and then resent the very people we are trying to keep close. True respect for boundaries means you do not require the other person to betray themselves in order to reassure you. You do not ask them to override their exhaustion to prove their devotion, or to silence their discomfort so you can feel secure. You allow them to have preferences, spaces, friendships, inner worlds, without interpreting them as abandonment. You recognize that when someone protects their emotional or physical space, they are also protecting the relationship from the slow corrosion of resentment. Without guilt, tripping is essential. Guilt is manipulation dressed up as concern. It says, if you love me, you will, and turns the other person's integrity into a problem to be solved. It pressures instead of invites, teaches people to comply, not to choose. And anything you obtain through guilt will eventually cost you intimacy, because the person has to leave themselves to stay with you. Respecting boundaries requires emotional maturity, the willingness to feel your disappointment without punishing the other person for causing it, the ability to sit with the anxiety that their no might awaken in you, and the curiosity to ask what that anxiety is really about. Often it is an old fear resurfacing, the fear of being left, ignored, or unseen. When you meet that fear within yourself rather than trying to control the other, love becomes safer for both of you. In a healthy relationship, boundaries are not walls, they are doors with handles on both sides. They allow closeness to be voluntary, not coerced. They make affection meaningful because it is freely given. When both people can say, this is okay for me and this is not, without being shamed, something profound happens, trust grows. Each person learns they can remain fully themselves without losing the relationship, and they can remain in the relationship without losing themselves. Number 3 is consistent behavior that matches words. Consistency is one of the quietest forms of love and one of the most healing. When behavior matches words, the nervous system relaxes. You are no longer decoding mixed signals, reading between lines, or living in the tension of promises that never materialize. Many people grow up with caregivers who said one thing and did another. I'm here, but emotionally absent. I love you, but unpredictable or frightening. The body remembers that contradiction. It learns vigilance instead of trust. So in adulthood, inconsistency can feel strangely familiar, even exciting, while steadiness feels foreign. Behavior that matches words says, you don't have to brace yourself. It means, I will call you, is followed by a call. I want to work on this, is followed by effort. I value you, is followed by presence. It is not perfection but alignment. There is no elaborate performance of affection followed by disappearance. No declarations of care that evaporate when feelings become inconvenient. You are not left piecing together explanations for why actions and promises live in different worlds. When someone is consistent, you stop living in hyper-analysis. You stop scanning for danger in tone changes or pauses in messages. Your energy shifts from monitoring to relating. And when you are the one practicing this consistency, you are not crafting an image, you are committing to integrity. You speak only what you can stand behind. You stop making promises to avoid conflict or to soothe anxiety in the moment. You risk disappointing someone honestly rather than pleasing them dishonestly. This alignment is profoundly regulating because it creates predictability without control. You can trust that the person who shows up today will resemble the person who shows up tomorrow. Not because they are rigid, but because they are rooted. It also reveals truth very clearly. When someone repeatedly says the right things but cannot live them, you no longer explain it away as bad timing or your own inadequacy. You see the gap for what it is, not a puzzle to solve, but information to receive. Consistency does not remove conflict or complexity. It simply ensures that when difficulties arise, you are dealing with the same person who said they care, not a disappearing version of them. Over time, this reliability becomes an atmosphere. The body unwinds, defenses soften. You do not have to audition for reassurance. Love begins to feel less like a test you might fail and more like a place you can rest. And perhaps most importantly, when your own behavior matches your words, you stop abandoning yourself while trying to keep others close. You become trustworthy to the person who needs it most, the part of you that has watched promises break and learned to expect the ground to give way. Another one is that taking responsibility instead of shifting blame. Consistency is one of the quietest forms of love and one of the most healing. When behavior matches words, the nervous system relaxes. You are no longer decoding mixed signals, reading between lines, or living in the tension of promises that never materialize. Many people grow up with caregivers who said one thing and did another. I'm here but emotionally absent. I love you, but unpredictable or frightening. The body remembers that contradiction. It learns vigilance instead of trust. So in adulthood, inconsistency can feel strangely familiar, even exciting, while steadiness feels foreign. Behavior that matches words says, you don't have to brace yourself. It means, I will call you is followed by a call. I want to work on this is followed by effort. I value you is followed by presence. It is not perfection, but alignment. There is no elaborate performance of affection followed by disappearance, no declarations of care that evaporate when feelings become inconvenient. You are not left piecing together explanations for why actions and promises live in different worlds. When someone is consistent, you stop living in hyperanalysis. You stop scanning for danger in tone changes or pauses in messages. Your energy shifts from monitoring to relating. And when you are the one practicing this consistency, you are not crafting an image, you are committing to integrity. You speak only what you can stand behind. You stop making promises to avoid conflict or to soothe the anxiety in the moment. You risk disappointing someone honestly rather than pleasing them dishonestly. This alignment is profoundly regulating because it creates predictability without control. You can trust that the person who shows up today will resemble the person who shows up tomorrow. Not because they are rigid, but because they are rooted. It also reveals truth very clearly. When someone repeatedly says the right things but cannot live them, you no longer explain it away as bad timing or your own inadequacy. You see the gap for what it is, not a puzzle to solve, but information to receive. Consistency does not remove conflict or complexity. It simply ensures that when difficulties arise, you are dealing with the same person who said they care, not a disappearing version of them. Over time, this reliability becomes an atmosphere. The body unwinds, defenses soften. You do not have to audition for reassurance. Love begins to feel less like a test you might fail and more like a place you can rest. And perhaps most importantly, when your own behavior matches your words, you stop abandoning yourself while trying to keep others close. You become trustworthy to the person who needs it most, the part of you that has watched promises break and learned to expect the ground to give way. Expand one, taking responsibility instead of shifting blame. Taking responsibility is the moment you stop treating your reactions as accidents caused by other people and start recognizing them as messages from within yourself. It is not about self-condemnation, it is about self-ownership. Blame says, you made me feel this way, as if your entire emotional world were controlled by someone else's behavior. Responsibility says, something in me was touched by what happened and I want to understand it. One approach protects the ego, the other heals the wound. Shifting blame is seductive because it offers relief. If the problem is always the other person, then you do not have to look at old pain, unmet needs, or patterns learned long ago. You can stay externally focused, collecting evidence for how others have failed you. But that relief is short-lived. It costs intimacy. When everything is someone else's fault, the relationship becomes a courtroom. One prosecutes, the other defends, and neither is truly seen. Taking responsibility does not mean you excuse harmful behavior or accept mistreatment. It means you separate two truths, what the other person did and what it awakened in you. You can say, this behavior is not acceptable, while also asking, why does this hurt in the particular way it does? What history is echoing here? That curiosity turns conflict into an invitation to know yourself more deeply. When both people take responsibility, arguments change shape. Instead of you always and you never, there is I notice in myself and I feel. Instead of competing to prove who is more wrong, both are exploring how their histories are talking through them in this moment. Shame softens. Defensiveness loosens. The goal is no longer victory, it is understanding. Blame is a shield we learn as children when accountability felt dangerous, when mistakes brought humiliation or rejection. Responsibility is the adult hand gently removing that shield and saying, we can face this now. It asks for humility, the willingness to say, I was reactive, I misunderstood, or I hurt you, without collapsing into self-hatred or inflating into self-righteousness. In a healthy relationship, responsibility becomes a pathway back to connection. Instead of withdrawing, punishing, or rewriting the story to protect pride, you turn toward the other person and toward yourself at the same time. You repair, you apologize without qualifiers, you listen without planning your counterattack. You learn, and quietly, something profound occurs. Trust deepens, not because you never wound each other, but because when you do, you are willing to own your part and tend to the rupture. The relationship stops being a battleground of egos and becomes a meeting place of two imperfect humans committed to growth. And another is mutual emotional availability. Both can feel, speak, and be heard. Mutual emotional availability means that two people are not only in the same relationship, but also in the same emotional room. It is the willingness to show up with your inner world, not just your social mask. Many relationships fail not because love is absent, but because one or both partners are emotionally unreachable, present in body, distant in feeling. You can sit next to someone every day and still feel profoundly alone if your emotions have nowhere to land. To be emotionally available is to allow your feelings to exist without immediately numbing them, explaining them away, or turning them into jokes. It is the capacity to say, I'm scared, I'm angry, I feel vulnerable, without needing to already have it neatly packaged or justified. It is also the capacity to hear those same truths from the other person without rushing to fix, defend, or silence them. You are not solving each other, you are witnessing each other. For many people, this is frightening. Emotional availability was not safe in their past. Feelings were dismissed, minimized, mocked, or met with volatility, so they learned to disconnect from themselves. They became experts at being fine. In relationships, that disconnection looks like shutting down during conflict, changing the subject when emotions rise, or staying busy instead of staying present. The body is there, but the heart has gone offline. Mutual availability asks both partners to reverse that retreat. It requires slowing down enough to notice what you are actually feeling beneath the rehearsed responses. It asks you to risk being seen in your uncertainty and imperfection. It asks you to listen, not for the purpose of responding, but for the purpose of understanding. When you are emotionally available, you are not just waiting for your turn to speak, you are allowing the other person's experience to matter. Being heard is as vital as speaking. A person who constantly shares but is met with indifference, dismissal, or subtle judgment will eventually stop opening up. Emotional openness cannot survive in a climate of criticism or minimization. To hear someone emotionally is to receive their experience as real, even if you see it differently. It is saying, your feeling has a place here. That simple acknowledgement can calm storms that logic never could. Mutuality is the key. If only one person is emotionally open, the relationship becomes lopsided. One becomes the therapist, the other the mystery. One carries the emotional labor, the other hides behind silence or intellectualization. Healthy connection happens when both people are willing to step into vulnerability, not perfectly, not all at once, but consistently enough that the relationship becomes a place where truth is allowed. In that space, intimacy deepens. You no longer have to earn closeness through performance or suppression. You do not have to translate your feelings into something more acceptable. You can feel, speak, and be heard, and so can they. The nervous system relaxes because you are no longer alone with what lives inside you. This is what makes love feel alive. Two people not just living side by side, but meeting each other where they actually are, in the living, breathing truth of their emotions. And the last is, conflict is handled with care, not control or withdrawal. Conflict is not a sign that a relationship is broken. It is a sign that two living, feeling human beings are present. What harms relationships is not the presence of conflict, but the way it is handled. When conflict is met with control or withdrawal, the nervous system receives a clear message. It is not safe to be different here. It is not safe to be hurt here. So people stop bringing their truth. They walk on eggshells or they disappear behind walls. Handling conflict with care means staying in connection without trying to dominate or vanish. Control says, I must win. I must make you see it my way. I must shape your feelings so that I feel secure. Withdrawal says, I will disappear so I don't have to feel this. I will punish you with silence or protect myself by shutting down. Both responses are driven by fear, fear of abandonment, fear of being wrong, fear of being unlovable when imperfect. Care is different. Care does not try to erase the conflict, it tends to it. It sounds like slower voices instead of louder ones, pauses instead of verbal weapons, curiosity instead of courtroom arguments. It is the willingness to ask, what is this really about for you, and what did this awaken in me beneath the content of the fight? Because most conflicts are not about the surface issue, the dish, the text, the tone, but about old, unspoken stories of worth, safety, and belonging that get stirred up by the present moment. To handle conflict with care is to stay near without attacking and stay open without collapsing. It is saying, I am upset, but I am not here to hurt you. I am here to understand and be understood. It means you can express anger without cruelty, disappointment without degradation, and frustration without threats of abandonment. It means you do not use silence as a weapon, nor intimacy as leverage. This approach requires emotional regulation. If your past taught you that conflict equals danger, your body will want to fight or flee. Caring for conflict begins with noticing that activation in yourself, the tightening chest, the heat, the urge to shout or disappear, and choosing not to hand the steering wheel to those sensations. You take a breath not to suppress the feeling, but to make space for it so you can speak from clarity rather than reflex. When both people practice this, conflict becomes less about winning and more about repair. Apologies are not extracted under pressure, but offered from recognition. Breaks are taken not as punishment, but as protection for the bond. I need a moment to calm down so I don't say something that would wound us. You return. You continue. You repair. Care in conflict says, the relationship matters more than my ego. It does not mean self-abandonment. It means you can hold your truth and the other person's humanity at the same time. Over time, this transforms the emotional climate. Arguments no longer feel like emotional earthquakes after which both people are left in ruins. They become bridges, sometimes shaky, sometimes messy, but leading back to one another with a deeper understanding than before. And perhaps the deepest shift is this conflict no longer feels like the end of love. It becomes part of love, two histories, two nervous systems, two hearts learning how to stay present with each other when it would be easier to attack or disappear. Healthy love is not something you stumble into by luck. It is something you become ready for. Not by perfecting yourself, but by telling the truth to yourself. The work is quiet and inward, noticing where you abandon yourself, where you harden, where you chase, where you hide, and meeting those places with compassion instead of judgment. You don't have to turn yourself into someone else to be loved well. You have to return to the person you were before you learn to perform for connection, before you believe that your needs were too much, before you confuse chaos with passion. The more you come home to yourself, the more clearly you recognize who can meet you there. Healthy relationships are not built on the absence of wounds, but on the presence of awareness. Two imperfect people saying in their own ways, I am willing to look at my patterns, I am willing to grow, I am willing to stay present. That willingness is the real miracle. If there is one thing to carry forward, let it be this: you are not hard to love. You have simply been in places that could not love you in the way you needed. As you cultivate your inner green flag, your boundaries, your honesty, your tenderness, your responsibility for your own heart, you no longer beg for the bare minimum. You become the guardian of your own worth. And from that place, love stops being a battlefield and begins to feel like belonging, not the kind you earn, but the kind you finally allow yourself to receive.